Welcome to Pensare Basketball Live. We're going to talk about Trayce Jackson's historical debut, and I don't mean historical like the way they say historical in 2026, because this dude was absolutely balling, and he did make a little bit of NBA history yesterday. So we're going to talk about that. What does this mean for Colin Murray Boyles? Jakob Poeltl potentially coming back next game against Detroit. Obviously, CMB's been playing out of position, nursing a thumb injury. What does this mean for Colin Murray Boyles with possibly Trayce Jackson-Davis and Jakob Poeltl usurping him for that center spot? And why might that be a good thing? We're also going to talk about the looming question, one of the biggest questions in Toronto Raptors right now, Toronto Raptor land, is what's going on with Sandro Mamukelashvili? He is very cheap. Can we keep him? Because he seems to be very important. We're going to talk about this mythical player called Jagradey Battle, a combination of three wings, none of whom are complete, none of whom are good enough to necessarily be the best wing off the bench. Will one of these guys carve out a role that will cement them as Darko's go-to first wing off the bench? And we're going to talk about the bigger picture, which is the Raptors are finally winning on the margins for the first time in 6 years. A lot of things are happening in Raptorland for the first time in 6 years. Make sure you give this video a like. First, we're going to listen to what Trayce Jackson-Davis had to say after the game.
You could see during the game they were hyping me up every time I made a play, giving me a lot of confidence. And so I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be a part of the team. And one of the assistant coaches came up to me and said, at the end of the day, it's just basketball. Just go out there and play. And so that's what I did.
Like, as you're getting familiar with timing and screen rolls and all the other systems, on the defenses, offensive rebounding, kind of like the simplest thing you can apply in a game?
Absolutely. Can always have a knack for rebounds, whether it be offense or defense. Just crash the glass. That was a big thing at halftime. He said that we were -1 or 2 on the glass. So just getting in there, trying to make an impact in any way I can, and that's what I did. Really good crew here. Obviously, it was really family-oriented. Coach Darko is a great coach, and I'm just happy to be here, happy to get to work. Obviously, the travel and everything, I'm a little tired, but I'm going to get back into playing shape, and I'll be ready to go.
Did you know much about Darko before you got talked about coming here? Did you know much about him with Dajo or anybody down there?
I didn't know that much about him. We had a coach that passed away, Coach Decky, and so I know they were really close. I love Coach Decky. He was kind of the big man coach, and so kind of his philosophy is a similar, very physical, playing hard, stuff of that nature, and so I think I'm going to fit right in.
They're both teams that operate with like triangle concepts, delay action, a lot of the split action stuff. Was that helpful, knowing that you get to run a lot of the same actions and be the same trigger man?
Absolutely. Being the trigger man, just making smart basketball plays, attacking when you need to attack. And then I got guys that want to throw me the ball up in the sky. So even though we missed a few, we're going to get those timing down. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Thanks, Trayce.
So when I said Trayce Jackson-Davis had a historical debut, I was not kidding. This is the first Raptor debut that has resulted in a double-double since Kawhi Leonard. Remember that guy? Fun guy? Ha, 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 ha. Yeah, that guy. Pretty great. This is also, again, this is per my research. I could be wrong. Someone please correct me in the chat after, but I don't think I am. This is the least number of minutes that a player has played this year in the NBA and registered a double-double. That's pretty crazy. He had 10 points and 10 rebounds. It's also worth noting that based on which data site you check, it's either 49% or 55%, regardless of whether it is 49 or 55. This is the highest offensive rebound percentage any player had last night in the NBA. This is also the highest rebound percentage of any player that any Raptor has had all year. There's only a few Raptors who even come close, and it's Scottie Barnes, mainly like at 39%. There's a couple of Colin Murray Boyles, like 32%. There's a Jakob Poeltl, 29%. I think RJ Barrett's offensive rebound percentage high on the year is 12%. Do you understand how legit insane it is? Truly nuts. Currently, if you go to Basketball Reference, he leads the Raptors in just about every single analytic imaginable. PER, he got it. Offensive rebound percentage, he got it. Box plus minus, he got it. This is not sustainable. But it does register a major point, which is this is what the Raptors have needed. They miss a tremendous amount of shots. This team needs offensive rebound production. And I think what Trayce showed in his in his debut is that he is exactly as advertised. A lot of Warrior fans right now, you'll find some solace in this, are crashing out, absolutely losing their minds. I can't believe Kerr didn't play this guy. See, I told you we can't develop anyone. Yo, maybe that's true. Maybe that's actually true. But honestly, it's probably not realistic to expect 8 offensive rebounds every single time Trayce Jackson-Davis steps on the floor. But what you can expect is smart connective passing. What you can expect is good rim protection, probably the best rim protection you've had on this team since, I don't know, go down the list. When was the last time that you had a center who can block shots like this? I'm struggling. Serge Ibaka, Marc Gasol, because I promise you, by the time you got Jakob Poeltl in Toronto, he was not the rim protector that he was early in his San Antonio days. So you just haven't had a guy like this. I mean, you can maybe point to a little bit of Chris Boucher in there, but again, Chris gave up so much as a rim protector. This is a foundationally solid player. He doesn't shoot well. He missed a bunch of free throws yesterday, which could have upped his totals even more. But he's obviously very connected, and he's 25 years old, soon to be 26, and you have a team option on him. So all in all, it's hard to point to anything, anything deficient about Trayce's debut. He's obviously fitting in, and Darko was a little bit coy with the media after the game, saying like, I'm going to give him some time. I'm going to give him 10, 15 games. Oh, he's going to earn them. And I think at some point, he's just going to start eating into Jakob Poeltl's minutes. It's going to make the Raptors center decisions a little bit easier this offseason because you do have like a 15 to 20-minute guy off the bench that you can give minutes to. I think the Raptors should probably explore a Trayce extension this offseason. You may say this is presumptuous to say like, man, this one game. The man was not born yesterday. We have 4 years of collegiate data from the Indiana Hoosiers, and not to mention we have 3 years of Warriors data, and there's very clear evidence on what he can and cannot do as a basketball player. And I think what he can do is fit in as a perfect big off of the bench for a Darko offense. He works wonderfully. And I joked with Samson Folk yesterday. I said, first of all, like I joked that he was going to get some of the dumbest questions, but I knew he's going to get that split action question from Samson. And I'm glad that Samson on clock gave him that split action question. But I was joking after, and I said, this guy's so smart. He's actually one of the rare basketball players on the Raptors who can actually answer Samson's questions because, yeah. But a lot of people are asking, and this was a conversation that's happening on Twitter Spaces, is like, wait a second. We got this really amazing rookie with the 9th overall pick, and he's been playing center. And there's been this sort of repetitive point in Raptorland, which is the greatest thing about Jakob Poeltl going out is CMB is blossoming. And this is a problem for me because things repeated over and over that are not scrutinized, somehow they become fake news. Let's talk about this. Colin Murray-Boyles is not a center. I don't know if that's breaking news for you. He's not a center. He is not a center. He will never be a center. He is not a center. The fact that he is doing okay as a center is the same thing as saying Scottie Barnes is doing okay as a center. It doesn't mean he's a center. It doesn't mean you should trade Jakob Poeltl. It doesn't mean that Trayce Jackson-Davis should go to the third string. Colin Murray-Boyles is not a center. What is Colin Murray-Boyles? CMB is a forward. He is a wing. He is a forward. And if you can work out some of the stuff that we were seeing at South Carolina with the mid-range pull-up jump shooting, some of the stuff we were seeing early in his Raptors rookie career, where it's like he was more comfortable pulling up from three and, taking the spot up threes. This is a guy who's best on the wing. Even as a defender, you're taking away the juice, right? Now, again, you can play Magic Johnson at center. It doesn't make him a center. You can play LeBron at power forward. It doesn't make him a power forward. You're taking away this guy's best attributes because of a necessity to plug in a spot because Scotty doesn't want to play center. And I get it. Neither one of these guys should play center. So right now, a lot of people are like, well, will this eat into CMB's minutes? I don't think it will because CMB will just replace one of your useless wings that you play every night. Ochai Agbaji is now in Brooklyn. Jacoby and Grady, and who we'll talk about later, these guys are probably going to have to figure it out. Sandro is definitely going to play. Scotty and BI are definitely the two best players. Colin Murray-Boyles is going to have to find a way around that, right? He's going to have to find a way into that. And I understand that there's the complication of playing him with Trayce Jackson-Davis, but I really think it's a bit of a problem for the other team as well, because when you put them together, there's going to be a lot of offensive rebounds that these guys are going to be able to generate. I'm just saying, if the Houston Rockets can have a top 6 offense playing Alperen Şengün and Steven Adams, then why can't you do something similar here? We saw it yesterday. The offense was incredible with Trayce Jackson-Davis on the court. So I think CMB is going to get a much needed break from having to battle with guys who are much bigger. And from the perspective of development, what is the point of developing a guy at a position that he's not even going to play? And he has to learn the game as a wing. And again, as a defender, from my scouting, his best attribute is switching onto the wing, being a pest on the wing, helping Scotty, cannibalize that space, attacking guards. This is not a guy that you want to be funneling 16 drives a game to. So I think this is going to be a blessing in disguise when CMB eventually comes back from his thumb injury. Speaking of bigs on the Toronto Raptors and guys on very cheap minimum contracts, and speaking to the larger theme of this live, which is the Raptors winning on the margins, I think that Sandro Mamukelashvili has a really good case as the greatest Raptors free agent signing of all time. And let's be honest, we haven't had a lot. Hedo Turkoglu immediately flopped. Um, there's been a lot of failures. DeMar Carroll, Hedo Turkoglu, Otto Porter, who I love, God, one of my favorite players of all time, just was washed by the time he got here. Sandro is not washed, but Sandro chose to be here. There's a story that Evan, shout outs to Evan on Twitter Spaces yesterday on the Raptors Space with Zazu shared with us, and he's a bit of an insider with the San Antonio Spurs. And he shared that Sandro had a bigger contract on the table from the Spurs, but rather chose to come to Toronto for a bigger role. And that makes sense because this is a proven deal. It was always a bet on yourself, 1-1, which means the Raptors are going to have to pony up because this dude has delivered on his end of the bargain. He is giving you, and again, this is something debatable, but I would debate it confidently that he's been one of your top 5 players this year. You have a lot of players that make over $20 million. In fact, by my last count, you have 5 players who make over $20 million, and he's been better than at least 2 of them. So you have to parse the difference here. There's role, there's archetypes, there's things that get paid in the NBA. If you're looking at fair value for Sandro's extension, is it above what you can afford? No, I don't think so. But it might be a little uncomfortable. It might be a little bit uncomfortable. And I think it's going to definitely eat into the money that you potentially had, maybe at least in theory, saved up for RJ Barrett. This is a player who, in my opinion, on the open market is going to command offers from the Boston Celtics. I think he can get offer sheets from pretty much any non-tax paying team is going to be willing to offer him at least 8 to 10 million. And the problem with Mamu is kind of like the problem with OG, and I'm not comparing them necessarily as players, but they have this one thing, and it's the grand P word. It's called portability. They have portability. They are a plug-and-play solution for just about any team. Orlando could use them. Lakers could use them. Clippers could use them. Any team. I think Boston could really use them next to Tatum and Brown, and I think he would effectively do a lot of the stuff that they wanted Chris Boucher. Some people think that he's a really negative defender. I simply disagree. He's not a negative defender. He's just because he's not a rim protector or a great rebounder doesn't mean he's not a really good defender. He just plays out of position at center because you have no center. So I think Sandro should get an offer sheet from the Raptors on the first day of free agency. And I think it should be, it's going to sound rich to people, I think it should be $24 million across 2 years. I do. I think it should be $24 million across 2 years. And if you need to throw in a third-year sweetener, I would do it. Yeah, $12 million. A lot of people yesterday were saying $6 million, $5 million. I don't even think y'all are close. I think he's going to get like 10 to 12 and probably closer to 12. Jagradey Battle. What's going on with the Raptors wings, man? The Raptors have a lot of wings. They have Elijah Martin. They have Jonathan Mobo, both of whom are balling out in the G League. They have AJ Lawson. Those 3 are probably third string. Then they have Chucky Hepburn and, Jamal Shed. And technically, Jamal Shed's presence on the court will eventually push Emmanuel Quickley into a wing role. So maybe none of these guys are going to play a playoff rotation. I mean, when you think about shrinking the playoff rotation, it's a very good chance that your playoff rotation will include no wings off the bench. If you go 8 deep, none of these guys are making that rotation because Trayce Jackson-Davis, Colin Murray-Boyles, Sandro Mamukelashvili, Jamal Shed, that's 9. Okay, just so we're clear, that's 9 guys without even talking about Jagradey. Okay, so one of these guys is going to be pushed out guaranteed. And it's probably going to be Jameson Battle. Contract, status, age, upside, probably that. Between Jacoby and Grady, I think you're really talking about two very different players. If you're talking just pure offensive upside and what he does for the team, I think you could make a case that CMB stepping into a wing role is going to make Grady even more useful and more crucial. So at this point, Jacoby, in order to keep his spot within the rotation, I think is just going to have to start hitting some threes. And he's going to have to start hitting threes in a way where he puts some distance between his efficiency as a scorer and Grady's gravity as a scorer, which is going to be really hard. In my 100% opinion, I think that if I had to choose, y'all know, bias aside, I'm picking Jacoby 20 times out of 20, and I'm not even looking back. I don't even think it's close. But Grady has a tremendous amount of upside. He is 22 years old. You have invested a lottery picking this guy. You do want to get a good gauge on him before you give up on him this summer. There's a lot of players who've been given up at 22, 23. I mean, look at Aaron Nesmith, the Boston Celtics, one of the best organizations. They gave up on him, right? Currently, the Indiana Pacers have given up on Ben Mathurin. You need a fair sample size to be able to say yes or no. You obviously believed in this guy. I don't think it's a really good look if you're talking about it from an asset perspective to put Grady on ice right now. I definitely don't agree with anyone who's saying he should be in the G League. That's truly like cratering value. And I mentioned it during yesterday's members live. This summer, you have a $29 million RJ, let's say matzo ball hanging on your cap sheet, which is an expiring contract. Grady makes a lot of money. He's a pretty large salary. He makes a lot more money than Jakob Poeltl. He has one less year of team control. Having Grady pop off over the next 25 to 30 games would be the biggest thing for this team going forward, not just to see what you have in him, but also, most importantly, to boost that trade value. This is a player who obviously a lot of people, in this organization believe in. They've given him umpteen chances. He was awful. He has been awful. He's been one of the worst players in the league for 3 years. I don't think that that's even an exaggeration. Apart from that blip at the end of his rookie season, and then you could take the first 20 games of last season. If you take those samples out, there is a very legitimate case that you can make that he's the worst player in the NBA, period. Doesn't give you a defensive floor. The offense isn't quite clicking to the level that it would need to. There's a lot of one-dimensional, let's call it like one-dimensional scorers, guys who, play kind of one end of the court. But if you're only going to play one end of the court, you have to be a specialist, and he's not a specialist. And if you're not good enough to be a generalist, then you have to be a specialist. And if you're not good enough to be a generalist and you can't be a specialist, then you end up in Asia or Europe or Israel. So my view on this is Grady's NBA future is kind of in the balance. Jacoby's is not. You have to make a decision sooner on Grady. Grady is probably, if he pops off, the better asset. So, but Jacoby's a better player. So I would give Grady the first opportunity to lose the spot. And basically, this is probably not going to work well because he is a guy who builds on confidence. Obviously, there's also another one. There's another thing, which is the Raptors have an open roster spot. And you could just literally say no to all of these guys and just go for Hayward Highsmith or Matisse Thybulle and just say, you know what? We have a chance to actually win a playoff round right now. I don't know. Maybe this game against Detroit is going to tilt the Raptors' future a little bit. Maybe it's going to tilt their perspective on who they think they are. And maybe at that point, you just say, you know what? If we get garbage time minutes, if y'all want to earn it, you can earn it. But we're going to bring in some insurance in case none of y'all are playable in the playoffs. Once again, if the Raptors are healthy, there's a version of this roster. Because of the abundance of wing adjacent players, you start 4 wings, right? Scotty's a wing, BI's a wing, RJ's a wing, IQ's a wing. They start because of politics. There's no rational reason that all 4 of those players should be starting together. You actually have a lack of lineup diversity in your starting lineup. But the reason that that works for you as it comes down to constructing your depth is that if you were to go into the playoffs and only go 9 deep, there's no necessity to play any of these guys. Case in point, your starting lineup plays. Trayce is the first big off the bench. CMB is the first wing off the bench. Jamal is the guard off the bench. Mamu is the wing adjacent big off the bench. There you go. The Raptors don't play all bench lineups anyway. It's not like this is a team that just swaps out one squad for another squad hockey style. So you could look at this and just say, going forward, we're not playing any of these guys until they beat out like Colin Murray-Boyles or Sandro Mamakosha, which is just never going to happen. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. Colin Murray-Boyles is the best young asset not named Scotty Barnes on this roster. He's not losing his rotation spot. And I think Grady and Jacoby and Jameson Battle, unfortunately, are going to be woken up very quickly to the business of the NBA, which is it does not wait for anybody. Ben Mathurin was seen as a staple of the Indiana Pacers' future just 2 years ago. Jaden Ivey 3 years ago was seen as the backcourt mate for Cade Cunningham, and they were going to be building championships around this team. Those guys are gone. So the shelf life is very, very short. It's nice to have, 3 wings on your roster that do different things, but can sort of fit into what you're doing. But I think the time for development, for the most part, was prior to February 8th. So I think the Raptors have something bigger to chase right now. I think they have to, do their due diligence and actually chase it. And I understand. I have said it many times myself. The Toronto Raptors contention window will open in 2027. Cool. And a lot of people said the OKC Thunder's contention window will open in 2026 until they won a championship in 2025. Sometimes you're good, sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're just good and lucky, and you're a little bit early. The Toronto Raptors, while not anyone's definition of a playoff favorite, are still a team that has a puncher's chance right now on the strength of Brandon Ingram's shot making, on the strength of if Jakob Poeltl comes back healthy. A question that I posed yesterday in the Twitter Spaces and also to myself many times is, what is the gap between Jakob Poeltl and the center you think needs to replace Jakob Poeltl? Is it just health? Is it a little bit of a time machine, right? I think you have to think about this from the perspective of this. What if you had traded Jakob Poeltl for Isaiah Hartenstein and you added a couple first-round picks? Would you now be picking the Toronto Raptors to beat the Detroit Pistons in the playoffs? Would you now pick the Raptors to go a couple rounds? What if you had traded Jakob Poeltl for the player that Indiana traded for, Ivica Zubac? What if you had actually traded Jakob Poeltl for a center that you respect and the league respects a lot more because he hasn't spent the last 3 years on a losing team? Okay. Brandon Ingram helps everybody, right? Well, what would Brandon Ingram do for a healthy Jakob Poeltl? The Raptors, in their own internal calculus, and I disagree with this, but again, who am I? They have said confidently that Jakob Poeltl is a top 10 center. They have paid him like a top 10 center, but we haven't seen him healthy. But when he has been even partially healthy this year, when he's been feeling even halfway himself, the Raptors are 10-2 this season. They are 10-2. In those games where they are 10-2 and RJ Barrett has played, they're undefeated. There are no losses. So the 2 losses in that 10-2 sample come with RJ Barrett also missing games. And there's no Trayce Jackson-Davis in the sample. And he helps. Immediately he helps. And there's a lot of Ochai and Grady bricks in these samples, and they ain't playing right now. There's a world in which you have to approach this with the best is yet to come. Again, the Raptors have been phenomenally healthy when it comes to missing time due to injury. They haven't been as lucky when you filter out contract value due to missed contract dollars missed to injury. They haven't been as lucky. So then yesterday they brought up this thing on the broadcast. It was 27th. The Raptors are 27th in terms of time missed. They are also on the flip side 3rd in terms of luck adjustments for opponent time missed. So not only have you been super healthy, the other teams that you play are disastrously almost always missing an all-star. All of this gives you a spooky sample size of like, we might be fake news. I get you. We might actually be fake. We might. But something just occurred to me when I watched the Indiana Pacers yesterday. When this team plays at even their reasonable expected amount, RJ's not right now. Let's just be real. RJ's not right. Jakob has not been right all year. But there was a part of this season, albeit early, so maybe small sample size, maybe early sample size, maybe bad teams, where the Raptors were a top 5 offense and a top 5 defense, and a top 5 half-court offense. Those numbers were unsustainable and kind of crazy, but can we land somewhere close to that? Could we be a top 10 half-court offense? The big picture here is obviously that, I mentioned this in yesterday's members live. The Raptors are not a done product. There are players on this team that are young that are going to be much better 2 years from now, including Trayce Jackson-Davis and including Scottie Barnes, who were basically LeBron and Wilt against the Indiana Pacers yesterday. There's going to be roster moves. There are contracts maybe that can be leveraged forward. If you look at what's going on in the NBA, how many times over the last 2 to 3 years have we seen a player that was really bad get attached because he was an expiring to a couple picks or one pick for a player who was really not bad? The Raptors did this with Bruce Brown, and then they got Brandon Ingram. They added a pick, and they added the disastrous $11 million contract of Kelly Olynyk, which still had 2 years. What if Kelly Olynyk only had 1 year? You might have not even had to add that first round pick. You might have just been able to add a few seconds because the Pelicans were desperate to get off of Ingram. It's the same thing. So now go forward this offseason, you have RJ Barrett's $29 million expiring. Go forward the next offseason, you have Brandon Ingram's $42 million expiring. Go forward one more offseason, and you have Emmanuel Quickley's $32 million expiring. And in 1 season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons, you can swap out all the pieces, add a pick, add a couple picks, add a young player, add a draft pick that worked out, add Jacoby, add CMB, I don't know, and get the roster that you actually want. The point here is the best is yet to come. But what if the best comes sooner than you're expecting? Here's my criteria for an NBA championship contender. Top 5 defense, top 10 offense, top 10 player. That is the basis for even having a chance. Scotty is not a top 10 player. This is not a top 10 offense. This is not a top 5 defense. So we go 0 for 3. But when Jakob Poeltl was playing healthy, this was a top 10 offense. This was a top 5 defense. Trayce helps in tremendous spades. He's the best offensive rebounder on this team. He helps with the offense. So add in Trayce in place of some of the dead minutes that you were giving to Ochai and, Grady, and you suddenly become a bigger team. I think you have your top 10 offense. You have your top 10 defense. The defense has been top 10 all year. So now all you need is for Scotty to take a jump from the 14th or 15th or 16th best player to the player we saw yesterday. In a really weird way, and this has been the case for the last 4 years, the Raptors' big picture is always a Scottie Barnes question. What type of player can you be? Can you hit jump shots? The difference between the Raptors being a top 10, top 5 half-court offense and an abysmal half-court offense is Scottie Barnes hitting jump shots. That's it. It's that simple. Hate to tell you, if Scottie Barnes hits 30% of his threes, he's averaging 22 points per game. 34% of his threes, 36% of his threes on higher volume, he's averaging like 24 points per game. Here's the funny part. He's had a 31-game sample, 35-game sample in his career where he has done that 2 years ago when he was materially a worse shooter. RJ and Scotty hitting jump shots is the difference. Now, if Scotty never becomes a great jump shooter and all you do this offseason is replace RJ for an upgrade as a jump shooter, but someone who is an upgrade as a jump shooter and a stopper, you might be there a year early. You might be there a year early. And to all the people who say the East is getting better, the East is getting better, the Raptors are getting better too. I don't think Indiana is a contender next year. I know a lot of people are. This is a big picture thing for the future of the East and really when that Raptors window could open. I do think Detroit is a powerhouse and they're coming fast, but they still have a lot of young players and a lot of older players that are very relied on. The Raptors don't have a lot of older players that are relied on. Jakob Poeltl is the oldest player they consistently rely on, and he hasn't been healthy. You look at Tobias Harris, he is over 30. You look at Duncan Robinson, he is over 30. These players are expensive, and they're going to have to be replaced at some point for Detroit. Injuries change outcomes. Cleveland has obviously mortgaged a hefty part of their future in order to go all in on James Harden. I think that shrinks their window. I certainly felt a lot better about their future when they had Darius Garland. I feel a lot better about their present right now, but their present could be up in a year as James Harden tries to finesse his way out of town. Everyone is scared of the contender brimming in Washington. I'm not going to disrespect the Washington Wizards. I know better than that. Trae Young is a hell of a player. 4 years ago, Anthony Davis, hell of a player 4 years ago. Right now, they will represent, however, some of the worst contracts in the NBA until they prove they can be healthy. The the Wizards are doing a really good job with the draft, though. I will give them that. They have nailed almost every draft pick. Sans the one that I wanted them to take, which is Bilal Coulibaly, and Bub Carrington hasn't been great or anything to write home about. Trey Johnson's been solid. Will Riley's been great. Justin Champagne's popping off. It's not their draft pick. That's our guy, but he's popping off. So overall, if the Raptors want to continue this, they're gonna have to continue to win on the margins, and they're winning on the margins for the first time in 6 years. And oh, by the way, this is the first time in 6 years a lot of shit has happened. Yesterday on the broadcast, they said this is the first time in 6 years that the Toronto Raptors have swept 5 teams. Cool. There's a lot of things that are happening for the first time in 6 years. In fact, when I was doing some breakdown early in the season, I think when the Raptors were, I want to say they were like 18-8 or something like that, or 20-8, whatever the record was early. I was just like, this is the best start since. And every time I say this is the best this blank since, it's almost always 2018, 2019, 2019, 2020. Nothing that the Raptors have done over the last 5 years is more impressive than what the Raptors are currently doing right now. Whether you're talking about having a top 5 defense, whether you're talking about, having a true, guy that at least you can think about building a championship team around. The last guy that you had was before you figured out the guy wasn't the guy, which was Pascal in 2020, right? So there's a lot to be optimistic about if you're a Raptor fan. Obviously, the rebuild is very early. I'm really glad the Raptors didn't do any stupid things, but also the most important thing, which is the Raptors have gotten back to their roots. And that's really the bigger picture. They're winning on the margins. You want to talk about how this little core that we were talking about on the front cover was even assembled. Take a look. Jakob Poeltl, 19th overall pick. Grady Dick, late lottery pick. CMB, late lottery pick. Jamal Shed. On the margins of a trade for one of the worst players in the NBA, you netted a 45th overall pick that gave you Jamal Shed. And Jamal's been amazing. Trayce Jackson-Davis traded for a future second-round pick from the LA Lakers, despite being 5th in value replacement in his draft class 2023, still young enough to develop, and I would argue maybe has more untapped potential than anyone is willing to acknowledge right now, because I genuinely think the Warriors suck at developing players. There's maybe two players who've gotten notably better with the Warriors, and that's Moses Moody and Guy Santos. Like, everybody else just kind of flatlines, gets worse, or is out of the league very soon. So maybe Trayce is just going to feel a second wind of his NBA career here. Sandro Mamukelashvili, a player who was starting to really show signs of growth last year in San Antonio, takes this 1+1, and if you can keep him, what a get. And Jamison Battle, the perfect 12th, 13th, 14th guy on a roster, a break-in-case sharpshooter, works hard. Then you have guys like Jonathan Mobo, Elijah Martin, and Chucky Hepburn. The Raptors are probably going to have to make a decision. You probably can't carry all 3 of those guys into next season. But as someone who's been watching a lot of 905, it's really hard to understand how these guys are bad players. They're really good players in the 905. I don't know what to tell you. They're really good. They're showing signs everywhere. Every time I see, Elijah Martin cross over, step back, pull away, I'm just like, yo, is that Dwayne Wade out there? He is the Dwayne Wade of G League, right? Jonathan Mobo hitting no dip threes with to end the quarter. Jonathan Mobo defending everybody. Like, this 905 team, it's so weird how expectations change with fans. When the Raptors 905 was doing really, really well in like 2017, 2018, 2016 with Pascal and, Fred, people cared a lot more than they do today. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because people think of the 905 as an extension of the Toronto Raptors as opposed to an entity in themselves. I got news for you. The Raptors 905 have been the best basketball team in Canada this year. Okay? Just point blank, period. Relative to, I'm not saying they would beat the Raptors would mop the floor with this team. I'm saying relative to the competition they face, this has been the best team in the country. They might have been the best team in the G League this year. And Elijah Martin and Jonathan Mobo and the coaching staff there are a huge part of that. So you hope that 2 of the best athletes on your team can have a miracle offseason. And here's a bonus. Maybe these guys not being great out the gate, but showing you steady signs of improvement will allow you to give them a contract that does not cripple you. I'll give you a couple examples of some of the best contracts in the NBA, and you tell me what they had in common. Denny Avdia. What is Austin Reeves? Now compare that to a Gilbert Arenas. And again, this late bloomer thing, it's very important to realize. These second round contracts are often much shorter, which means the time for an extension comes up much sooner. Whereas Grady will have 4 full years, Ochai will have 4 full years. Jamal will not have 4 full years. He'll have 3. J-Mo might only have 2. CMB will have the full 4. But Jamison Battle, he was basically on the clock the second he signed. Some of these guys show you something before they show the league something that may allow you to get a little bit of a head start. From a value perspective, some of these second round picks and undrafted guys, because of their perceived lower value, lower floor, they're older guys, you might be able to get them on a cheap 3-year extension. And then the second they sign it, it's like the best contract in the NBA. It's kind of how people feel about Denny Avdia right now. The Wizards gave him a contract. It's Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson's another example. Not the cheapest contract, but $30 million for that dude. He's an all-star. If he had to sign the contract today, he'd be a $40 million player. Easy. So getting value on these deals might not be the worst thing in the world. Maybe Jonathan Mobo shows you just enough to command a 3-year, $10 million extension. Maybe Trayce Jackson-Davis shows you just enough. And then there's enough concerns from the rest of the league of him being undersized and not shooting and not being a good free throw shooter that you're able to get him on a 3-year, $12 million extension. The OKC Thunder have so many of these incredibly good contracts on their books. Jalen Williams, Brandon Carlson, Aaron Wiggins, AJ Mitchell. This is how you build a championship team. So, if Jacoby comes out and he's averaging 15 points per game and he's shooting 40% from 3, I'm sorry, you're gonna pay him $24 million on his next extension. But maybe he pops off when he's 24. And before he pops off, you give him a 4-year, $22 million deal. And he becomes the absolute best contract bargain basement wing in the NBA. So all of this late development stuff could work out, but obviously could also backfire. You want to have a healthy sample. You want to give these guys a lot of reps. You want to develop them correctly. I think the Raptors are winning on the margins precisely because they're finding value where others are missing it. They're caring about the details. They're valuing picks, valuing first-round picks and not throwing them away like idiots to get off of contracts that they don't like. I believe that the front office has made a shift over the last 12 months, and I just wanted to give them credit for it. The Raptors are winning the bigger picture right now, and I think the team's future is incredibly bright. We have one super chat here, and this is from Felicia. Thank you very much, saying, I love this format, Rob. Great analysis. Thank you very much. I'd previously thought about this just for a Saturday show, and I was like, you know what? This is a pretty good format for most shows. So once in a while, maybe on Saturdays, but, sorry. I'm so inconsistent. I'm just like non-committal. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'll do one on Saturday. Maybe I won't do one on Saturday. This could just be like, it is a little time consuming, but it's not that time consuming to do this beforehand. And it just organizes the show and keeps me on track. So, without this, I could, ramble off on a point for 13, 14 minutes and get circular. I do like the 3-minute clock though. It's a good thing. Anyways, and you know what? Give the people what they want. Some people think I talk too much. Some people think I go too long into certain points. So I think the 3-minute thing is good. And then the bigger picture of the points always allows me to circle back to the main point for anybody who wants to hear my extended thoughts on this. Also, I'll give a quick shout out. Yesterday, I watched probably one of the best stand-up comedy specials of my life. If you guys haven't heard of Mo Gilligan, is a black British comedian, possibly one of the funniest stand-up shows I've seen in my life. If you need a laugh today, definitely go and watch that special on Netflix. He's great. B Money said the Nazim Kadri type players, outside of naturally gifted players, the ones that show improvement, even if it's small every year, tend to work out long term. I am a big believer in trackable small growth, right? Give me the player who shows me a 5% steady improvement every year over the player who gives me 20% up, 10% down, 13% up, 15% down. I don't need like I love that I can set my clock by certain players on this team. And Colin Murray Boyles, James, I would say Jamal Shed, Colin Murray Boyles, Scottie Barnes. These are players who have Sandro might be the best example of that on the entire team. Like he is not an up and down player. He is a player who you can set a clock by. If you can go back to high school, college, this is a 54th overall pick. There's a reason he wears that number 54. He is a 54th overall pick. This is a good point. Atomic Habits. Yes, 1% better every single day. Do you know what 1% better compounds to over a lifetime? You might become the president of a country. I don't know. And you might actually earn it. Nadim saying, Rob, how does Scotty take his jumper to the next level? Any info from his trainer? Yeah, so with Scotty, it's so interesting. He can help you with 15 rebounds, 6 blocks, 4 steals. He can hit 3 threes. He can get 4 dunks, 6 drives, 14 assists. There's really not a single player that's less predictable in terms of statistical output than Scottie Barnes. He could give you a game with 5 threes. He could give you a game with 0 threes. It's very volatile. But I don't think it's volatile in the sense that, bad players are volatile. Do you know what I mean? It's not like the Terrence Ross effect where it's like a 51 game, 8-1 game. There is a consistent floor of impact. It's just very different depending on what his team needs that day. So maybe if the team is scoring really well, you're going to have a great Scotty defensive game. Maybe if they're defending really well, you can have a really great Scotty offensive game. Yesterday, the Raptors offense couldn't get out of the mud, but as Scotty said, the defense was really good. And Trayce obviously helps with that defense. Jacoby earning minutes yesterday, getting the chain. That helps majorly with defense. And so when Scotty sees that the defense is taken care of, I think he'll reserve some of his, some of the juice in his legs for offense. I implore anybody to go out today on the playground, go play a pickup game, and then try to attack the defensive end as recklessly as Scotty does. If you're playing full court and you survive that, if your lungs don't collapse after 2 minutes, let me know. One thing that people don't realize, I think a lot of people don't realize, is it's harder to move when you're bigger. Okay. Most guys who are Scotty's height can't move, period. They're hunched over, they have horrible posture, they can barely run. The fact that he not only is he's one of the most active defenders in the NBA, he's routinely top 5 in the NBA in total distance traveled defensively, but he also does so much offensively. And so you see, at least historically, you see a lot of shooters. They're either the best conditioned athletes, so it's a Steph, or they're very immobile. They're guys who kind of run corner to corner, corner to corner, like Buddy Hield, and that's just their job. There is a very, very correlative, connection between a very strong correlation between tired legs and short jumpers. And I think that Scotty's defensive load and overall sense of activity does not lend itself. There's nothing really mechanically wrong with his jumper. It's pretty consistent over and over. I don't think this is a training thing, right? Matthew saying, Rob, did you see Lou Williams say BI should have made the All-Star game over Scotty? Yeah, we don't respond to idiots. And I mean, no complete disrespect to Lou Williams, but this is not a close conversation. I know that the Toronto Raptors media, look, I'm a part of it. I'm a part of the problem. I said BI should make an All-Star team. I want to show my team some love. Okay. Do I think Brandon Ingram has been a top 70 player in the NBA this year? No, he has not been a top 70 player. He has not been a top 60 player. He's not been a top 50 player. Typically, you have to be a top 50 player to be an all-star. Every all-star that's deserving of all-star is a top 50 player. People want to complain about Alperen Şengün. You don't watch Alperen Şengün. Congratulations. Right? Look, Brandon Ingram's a fantastic player. He's much better, that he's healthy and he does a lot of great things. He's not an all-star this year. Okay. I love Brandon Ingram. I would want him to be an all-star. But is he more deserving of being an all-star than Norman Powell? You must be nuts. Ingram is a top 70 player. Come on. I mean, if he is, he's very French. Very French. You want to go through the list? You really think he's been a better player this year than LaMelo Ball, Concanipple? I don't think so. I think you can have a conversation with him and Brandon Miller for sure. He's better than RJ Barrett. He's definitely the second best player on your team, but it's like it's not by much. You know, the gap between him, Quickly, Sandro, they're very similar. They just do different things. And Brandon Ingram's things that he does are more statistically visible to the casual fan. And I mean, shout outs to Lou Williams, man, being a casual fan. That's awesome. Former NBA player. Look, there's an aesthetic bias, and there's a bias based on our experience, our view on the game. Am I going to be a little bit biased towards Serbian players? Am I going to see a little bit more value in Jovic and Topic than the average person? Yes, they remind me of myself. I'm from Serbia. Am I going to be a little impartial to New York City point guards? Hell yeah, because I used to grow up wanting to be a New York City point guard. I grew up in New York wanting to be a New York City point guard. Am I a little partial to Canadian players? Yeah, because I'm a Canadian citizen. I am a little partial to Canadian players. Is Lou Williams going to be a little partial to mid-range guys who take a large volume of shots? Yeah, because that's who he was. And Brandon Ingram might be his dude. But, like, I don't think so, man. Look, I have Alvin Williams trying to say that RJ was playing like an all-star, which ain't true. Not even close. It's just not close, dude. Come on. You got Lou Williams saying Scottie Barnes doesn't deserve to be an all-star over Brandon Ingram. Okay, cool, man. It ain't close, yo. It's not close. Scottie Barnes is at worst a top 20 player this year. Brandon Ingram is at best a top 50 player this year. There is a seismic gap between these two players right now. Nadeem saying, Rob, I like BI, but I feel the Toronto media is pushing the narrative of how him and Scotty playing so well together. But I see a lot of redundancy in their roles on the team. Thoughts? I don't think that they're redundant at all. I think it's a great problem to have, having two 6'9" playmakers, as long as you acknowledge that one of these guys is a real point guard level playmaker and the other one is just a good connective wing, and it's not the one you think. Last year, I had a real conversation. We were ranking all the passers in the NBA on Player's Choice, and Brandon Ingram was surprisingly high for other people. And I was just like, I don't think he passes like that. And then Mars was like, no, you don't know. And when the Raptors traded for Brandon Ingram, I started watching some of the clips, and maybe I watched the wrong clips because I got a very different impression of Brandon Ingram as a passer. Now, having watched him for 50 plus games as a Raptor, he is not on that list. He is not a great passer at all. He picks up his dribble way too often. He's delayed on his reactions. He doesn't read the game as well as you would like him to, but he's still a really, really good player. I would never, you haven't heard me petition in any way for Brandon Ingram to be, held accountable more often. Like, he does a really difficult thing for this team. He generates steady offense. It allows other people to do their jobs. There's not another player on this team. But if we had a Donovan Mitchell, if we had a Devin Booker, if we had a Jamal Murray, if we had a Jokic, a Shea, like if you had anything even close to that level of shot creation, even if you had a Zach LaVine, I think most people would be very angry at his turnovers and his lack of efficiency sometimes. Look, I think it's also worth noting, BI, Scotty, and this may be another big picture thing, which maybe I should have mentioned. I don't think either one of these players have played their best basketball yet. Okay. RJ might have played his best basketball, but I'm hoping that there's another level for RJ as well. But something we talked about, when I linked up with Scotty's trainer, was he didn't think that team had played their best basketball yet, and he knew that Scotty hadn't played his best basketball. I want to believe, and again, this might just be hopeful Raptor fandom, right? I want to believe that Scotty has another gear, and I want to believe that BI can go there with him. I want to believe that the player that I saw against the Knicks in the NBA Cup is a lot better than the player I saw last night against Indiana. And believe me, the stats would tell you that. The eye test would tell you that. Brandon Ingram, with rest, with motivation, could be a playoff game changer. And at which point he will be a top 25 player. But if all-star is not about talent, it's not about what you could do, it's what you're doing. Michael Porter Jr. is doing more. Pascal is doing more. They're also doing it more efficiently. Like they're carrying a larger load as well. They don't have as much help. So the fact that BI isn't more efficient is a byproduct of his game. And anyone who watches Brandon Ingram knows that this is just a player that analytics are never going to respect, period. He is, unless he becomes hyper efficient at the very inefficient things that he does. He overholds the ball, he overturns it over, he doesn't get to the line enough, he doesn't launch enough threes. So, yes, if you watch him on a basketball court and you watch Con Knipple on a basketball court, and you're like, Brandon Ingram is way better than Con Knipple. Yes, because he can do things that Con Knipple can't. And those are the things you choose to measure. However, it's also worth noting Con does a lot of things on the basketball court that Brandon Ingram does not do. And so does LaMelo Ball. And so you have to adjust and just say, what am I measuring? Am I overstressing certain measurements? Right? If my virtue of what is a great defender is who is the most switchable defender in the NBA, then Scottie Barnes is the best defender in the NBA. That's not how I measure defense. It's a big part of how I measure defense, but also activity level, deflections, blocks, rim protection, rim deterrence, screen navigation. There's 100 things I measure when it comes to defense. Rebounding, gap help, communication, efficiency. There's a lot of things, foul rates. If we factor all 100, you cannot make the case that Scottie Barnes is the best defender in the NBA. You're just coping. And I get it. I'm with you. I'll hey man, I'll put on the pom-poms. I'll be like Scottie Barnes DPOY. Scottie Barnes DPOY. Because he's close. He's at least close. Brandon Ingram's close. He's close. I mean, let's be honest, he's close. Okay. The Raptors are a good team. But you know what's ironic about the Brandon Ingram All-Star thing? If the Raptors hadn't force-fed him shots to try and make him an all-star, if they hadn't chased it, they would have gotten it by osmosis. That's the funny thing. And it speaks to a broader point in life. Chasing things often pushes them away. Have you noticed that? Yesterday when I was watching Mo Gilligan, I was realizing something. The comedian that I mentioned earlier, the British comedian. This guy's so loose. He's so funny. There's so many dips and valleys in how he tells the story. It's actually phenomenal. To anybody who wants to master public speaking or podcasting, go listen to Mo Gilly, bro. This dude, the way that he halts and then he speeds it up, it's so engaging. And I was like, yo, my monotonous flat ass trying to run a podcast and wondering why the numbers are dipping. And I'm like, I deliver so flat. I don't ever add expression to my voice. I don't change voices. I don't have that like dip and low. And, it makes it a lot more engaging. I guarantee you, if I do this and then I do this and I do this, it becomes a lot harder to pull away. And if you keep pushing, and, again, it's about brain activation, right? So if I become suddenly very charismatic and I start to, without losing myself, again, this is, I don't know why I have such an aversion to charismatic people. It's because I know so many charismatic people were fucking full of shit. And because I know so many charismatic people were full of shit, I'm just like, oh, well, if I don't want to be full of shit, it's a signal and noise problem. There's nothing wrong with being charismatic. Just don't be full of shit. You know what I mean? So when I was watching Mo Gilligan, I was just like, damn, this guy is hard to turn away. It's 12 a.m. and I am watching this guy, and I must watch every comedy special now because he's so good at telling stories, but he's also so good at keeping you glued. That's the point. Yup. And I don't think most podcasters are good at this. That's the funny part. A lot of people get on the podcast and they're just like, so how's your day? And that's bad podcasting. That's really bad podcasting. And something I noticed when I was on Player's Choice last week, I noticed when I start talking, people start looking down. I am succeeding in spite of myself at this podcasting. I sometimes look at the numbers and I'm like, well, I must be doing something right. I look at the podcast numbers. I'm like, okay, we got 14,000 subscribers. We don't have any media backing. We don't have big money sponsors. We don't have any sort of people propping us up. I must be doing a good job. I must be pretty good at this. And now I'm realizing I'm actually really smart about basketball and really bad at telling people about it. That's something I realized today. I was just like, man, I could really take this podcast to a completely different level if I took myself to a different level. If I could bring the right energy and again, this is a growth. To the people who've been in this chat, the people who've been with this channel since 2021, you have seen several changes in me. I'm sure of it. In fact, I've seen it in myself. So if you haven't seen it in me, you're fucking blind. You've seen me get calmer. You've seen me try to, engage with a little less anger. Maybe you've seen me get a little less hostile. Maybe you've seen me be a little bit more open-minded. Maybe you've seen me become a little bit more consistent, maybe more voluminous. Cool. I think you're about to see me get a lot more stylistic with my delivery. See, the two things are not mutually exclusive. Michael Balfour, what do you think about NBA Chev? Do you really want me to tell you what I think about NBA Chev? What I think about NBA Chev is what I think about most people who do this. People fall into two brackets. Either you're a great entertainer, you're a great talker, you're entertaining, right? Shout out Real Talk. You're great. You're great at talking about basketball. You have a voice, a flow, a rhythm. You have a style that people fuck with. People want to listen to you. People want to talk to you because you're cool. You're cool, right? You're like a friend, right? You're like a friend. So you can either be people's friend or you can be their teacher, right? So the friend, they give you a vibe. They give you chill. You could listen to them in the car and it's like you got your friend in the car with you, right? And that's dope. That's dope. Who don't want a friend in the car with them to talk to them about a topic that they're interested in? They're not particularly insightful. They're not insightful. They don't say anything new. They don't give you any vision. There's nothing new coming out of their mouth. It's all junk. Okay? It's total junk. It's Colin Knippel is a great shooter. What the fuck are we talking about, bro? The guy was born a great shooter. What are we doing here? LaMelo is a good point guard. Cool. Yeah. And what? OKC's defense is suffocating. Wow. Did you get that off a fucking cereal box, bro? There's nothing at all of substance coming out of these people's mouths, but it sounds good. Do you feel me? They could be wrong 100 times over. They could say things out of their mouth like Bobby Webster needs to be fired right now because he didn't get Domantas Sabonis. Any means necessary. It's entertaining. It's garbage though, right? That's how I feel about NBA Chev. Entertaining, garbage. However, there's the other side of it, which is the dry podcaster. The informative one, the one who takes you down a journey in your own mind, but isn't all that interesting to listen to. There's plenty of these people. People like me need to learn from people like NBA Chev. Because charisma is something you can learn, just like basketball is something you can learn. These super charismatic people who are great at talking about basketball could easily learn more about basketball so there's more substance to what they do. And in my opinion, when you have a guy who does both, that's when you end up with Kenny for real. That's where you end up with Jimmy High Roller, because those dudes are charismatic as fuck, very easy to listen to, understand the dips and valleys and flow and how to talk, and they have an accent that you fuck with, and there's something to it. They're charismatic, they're nice, they smile. I don't know. They're just nice to listen to. Who wants to listen to someone who makes them sad? Nobody, literally. Unless the person who makes you sad and kind of bored also gives you a dope amount of information that you hadn't thought of, which means you'll put up with it. I think for me, just as an evolution as a podcaster, I'm tired of being someone that a lot of people just put up with, because I'm not doing myself any favors by being unlikable. I'm not doing myself any favors by being flat in my delivery, and I'm working on it. So you're going to see the next evolution of me. I feel it in my heart. So if we combine Chev and Pensara, we'd have the GOAT. That's a good way to look at it, because he is damn entertaining. He is damn entertaining. Do you know how many times I've turned on a Chev video and I'll listen to him and be like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The Raptors. That's the Raptors I remember. Yeah, that's the Raptors. I'm getting them boards. Yeah, Moses Brown. He's great. Fred VanVleet with the peel, with the dribble. And I'll look at the clock and be like, 14 minutes gone. I'll be like, bro, you ain't saying nothing. You ain't saying nothing. You haven't said anything yet. I think they're like, if I sift through this shit like fucking, those sifters, like, I might get like a sentence out of this. There's a lot of people like this. Yo, and by the way, you if you want real basketball knowledge with real flow, Ticket TV. That's what happens. Legend of Winning. I'm not even gassing up Legend of Winning, but he's very good at what he does. I beef with the dude. I don't like the dude. He hates my guts. Fine. Ticket is another one, right? It's like Ticket has a style, a flow, a delivery. It's great, but he also understands basketball. So the question of if we combine Chev and Pensare, we'd have the GOAT. I'll tell you one thing. The GOAT already here. He's just got to level up. All right. There you go. Took the words out of my mouth. I'll talk to y'all later. And honestly, if the GOAT could ever figure out how to fucking work this autofocus, he'd really be the GOAT. I'll talk to y'all later. Have a great day, y'all. Peace.